They walked away from you, dismissed you, overlooked your worth, took your presence for granted until it became your absence. And now, here you are, wondering if you'll ever be valued, ever be seen, ever be chosen by those who chose to leave. But what if I told you that Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, knew exactly how to transform rejection into magnetic power? What if Seneca, exiled and stripped of everything, discovered the precise attitudes that make those who dismissed you suddenly see your true worth? This isn't about revenge. This isn't about manipulation. This is about becoming so aligned with your own value that those who couldn't see it before suddenly can't look away. The Stoics understood a fundamental truth. When you stop chasing those who don't value you and start embodying certain powerful attitudes, the entire dynamic shifts. The pursued becomes the pursuer. The dismissed becomes the desired. The overlooked becomes the unforgettable. But here's what makes this different from every other piece of advice you've heard. This isn't about playing games or pretending to be someone you're not. This is about becoming who you were always meant to be. The Stoics discovered that when you embody these 9 attitudes, you don't just make others regret losing you, you transcend the need for their regret entirely. And that transcendence, that's what makes them desperate to return. The Roman Empire fell, the libraries of Alexandria burned, civilizations crumbled to dust. But these 9 attitudes survived 2 millennia because they reveal something eternal about human nature. We only truly value what we cannot possess. We only desperately want what no longer wants us, and we only recognize worth when it no longer seeks our recognition. 1. The sovereignty of self-sufficiency. The first attitude that transforms everything is complete self-sufficiency. Not isolation, not coldness, but the profound recognition that you are whole without anyone else's validation. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Very little is needed for a happy life. It is all within yourself, in your way of thinking." When you embody this truth, when you genuinely don't need those who walked away, something shifts in the cosmic order. Think about water. When you desperately try to hold it, it slips through your fingers. But when you become the container, calm and complete in yourself, water naturally fills you. Those who didn't value you are like water. The moment you stop grasping, stop needing, stop chasing, you become the space they're drawn to fill. Epictetus, born a slave, understood this better than anyone. He couldn't control who valued him, who chose him, who saw his worth. So he chose to value himself so completely that others' opinions became irrelevant, and something remarkable happened. The same people who dismissed him as a slave sought him out as a teacher, not because he demanded their attention, but because he no longer needed it. The transformation began with a simple realization. Every moment spent needing validation from those who withheld it was a moment stolen from building his own unshakable foundation. He studied philosophy not to impress, but to understand. He taught not to be admired, but because teaching was his nature. He lived not for approval, but from principle. And this self-sufficiency became so powerful that emperors sought his wisdom. When someone leaves your life, your first instinct is to prove your worth to them, to show them what they're missing, to make them see your value. But this is precisely what keeps them away. Need repels, desperation pushes, chase triggers flight. But when you genuinely become sufficient in yourself, when your happiness doesn't depend on their return, you become magnetic. This doesn't mean pretending you don't care. Pretense is just another form of need. It means actually building a life so full, so purposeful, so aligned with your values that their absence becomes just a fact, not a tragedy. You wish them well from a distance while continuing to build your empire of self. The practical application starts tomorrow morning. Wake up and ask yourself, if they never returned, who would I become? Then become that person. Not to attract them back, but because that person is who you were always meant to be. Take the classes you postponed while waiting for their approval. Start the project you delayed while seeking their support. Build the life you imagined while hoping they'd be part of it. Build it alone. Build it complete. Build it so magnificent that their absence becomes architectural, structural, necessary for what you're creating. Self-sufficiency doesn't mean you don't want connection. It means you don't need any specific person's connection to be whole. You become like a garden that's beautiful whether anyone walks through it or not. People are drawn to gardens not because gardens need visitors, but because gardens offer beauty without condition, without requirement, without desperate need for witness. 2. The dignity of unbothered excellence. The second attitude is what I call unbothered excellence. You don't excel to prove them wrong. You excel because excellence is who you are. Seneca lost everything: wealth, position, influence, yet in exile he wrote his most profound works. Not to show Rome what they had lost, but because writing wisdom was his nature, and external circumstances couldn't change his internal nature. When those who didn't value you see you thriving without them, not in spite of them but independent of them, it triggers something primal. They realize that your excellence wasn't dependent on their presence. Your growth wasn't fueled by their validation. Your success wasn't contingent on their support. You were always this powerful, they just couldn't see it. But here's the crucial element: this excellence must be genuine, not performative. Posting success to make them jealous isn't excellence, it's need dressed as achievement. True excellence is quiet. It doesn't announce itself on social media. It doesn't require witnesses. It simply is. And that quiet power is what makes them question everything. Think about a master craftsman working in his shop. He doesn't craft perfect pieces to spite those who doubted his skill. He crafts them because imperfect work would betray his own standards. Whether anyone sees, appreciates, or values his work is secondary to the primary relationship between him and his craft. This is unbothered excellence, and it has a quality that performance can never achieve: authenticity. Marcus Aurelius led Rome through plague and war, excelling not to impress, but because duty demanded it. He wrote, "What we do now echoes in eternity." Your excellence isn't about them, it's about the echo you're creating, the legacy you're building, the person you're becoming. When you embody this attitude, those who dismissed you suddenly see what they walked away from, not because you're showing them, but because excellence is impossible to ignore. The key distinction is this: bothered excellence is reactive. It says, "I'll show you what you lost." Unbothered excellence is proactive. It says, "This is who I am regardless of who's watching." The first is exhausting because it requires an audience. The second is sustainable because it's self-generating. The first makes you dependent on their attention, even in their absence. The second makes you independent of their existence entirely. Start by identifying areas where you've been holding back, waiting for validation before fully committing. Perhaps you've been doing just enough at work, saving your best ideas for when they'd notice. Or maybe you've been living at 70%, keeping 30% in reserve for when they return. Release it all. Give your full excellence to the present moment, to the present company, to the present opportunity, not to forget them, but to remember yourself. 3. The power of selective indifference. The third attitude might seem counterintuitive: selective indifference. Not to everything, but specifically to those who demonstrated your worth meant nothing to them. The Stoics called this apatheia, not apathy as we understand it, but freedom from destructive emotions toward those who would destroy us. When someone doesn't value you and you continue to value their opinion of you, you give them power they didn't earn and don't deserve. But when you become genuinely indifferent to their judgment while remaining open to life itself, you reclaim your power entirely. This isn't anger or resentment dressed as indifference. Those are just different forms of attachment. This is genuine freedom from needing anything from those who gave you nothing. Imagine you're a merchant in ancient Rome. Someone comes to your stall, examines your finest goods, declares them worthless, and walks away. Do you chase after them, begging them to reconsider? Do you lower your prices desperately? Or do you simply wait for customers who recognize value? Those who didn't value you declared your worth insufficient. Your selective indifference says your evaluation is noted and irrelevant. But selective indifference goes deeper than just not caring about their opinion. It's about recognizing that their inability to see your value says nothing about your value and everything about their capacity for recognition. A person who can't appreciate gold isn't an authority on gold's worth. They're simply someone who lacks the ability to recognize treasure. It's to protect your own accurate self-assessment from their inaccurate evaluation. Marcus Aurelius faced this constantly. Senators who smiled to his face plotted behind his back. His own son, Commodus, rejected everything he tried to teach. Instead of desperately trying to force them to see his value, Marcus wrote, "How much trouble he avoids who does not look to see what his neighbor says or does." He became selectively indifferent to those whose opinions were toxic while remaining deeply engaged with those whose perspectives had merit. This attitude creates a psychological shift that's almost mystical. The moment you truly stop caring about their opinion, they start caring about yours. The moment you stop needing their validation, they start needing your attention. The moment you become indifferent to their presence, they become desperate for access to yours. The practice begins with catching yourself in moments of mental argument with them. You know these moments where you're having imaginary conversations, defending yourself, explaining your worth, proving your value to someone who isn't even there. Stop. Each time you catch yourself, say, "Their opinion of me is not my concern." Redirect that mental energy toward someone whose opinion matters, starting with your own. Create what I call an indifference practice. Once a day, when you think of them, instead of indulging in emotional reaction, practice genuine neutrality. Think of them like you'd think of a stranger in a distant city. They exist, they're living their life, and it has nothing to do with you. This isn't suppression, it's perspective. With practice, this neutrality becomes natural, and with naturalness comes freedom. 4. The grace of moving forward. The fourth attitude is the grace of moving forward without bitterness. Bitterness is drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. It's carrying those who hurt you on your back while claiming you want to be free of them. The Stoics understood that bitterness is just another chain binding you to those who already walked away. Marcus Aurelius faced betrayal from his most trusted general, Avidius Cassius. Instead of bitterness, he wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." When you move forward with grace, without resentment, without constantly referencing the past, you demonstrate a strength that's impossible to fake. This strength doesn't scream, it whispers. It doesn't demand attention, it commands respect. Moving forward with grace means you stop telling the story of how they wronged you. Not because the story isn't true, but because you're no longer a character in that chapter. You're writing new chapters now, and they don't require extensive backstory about past rejections. When someone asks about them, you speak factually, not emotionally. We went different directions. Period. No drama, no emotional charge, no extended explanation. This doesn't mean forgetting or pretending it didn't hurt. It means metabolizing the pain into wisdom, transforming the rejection into redirection. Every moment you spend bitter about their leaving is a moment you're not spending on your becoming. And your becoming is what makes them realize what they lost. Seneca understood this profoundly. When Nero, whom he had mentored from childhood, turned against him and eventually forced him to suicide, Seneca didn't spend his final moments in bitterness. He spent them teaching, writing, demonstrating that grace under ultimate rejection is possible. His letters from that period don't rail against Nero's ingratitude. They explore philosophy, wisdom, the art of living. He moved forward, even when forward meant toward death. When you move forward with grace, you're essentially saying, "Thank you for the lesson. Thank you for the space you created for something better. Thank you for showing me I was settling." This isn't said to them, it's lived through you. And living testimony is infinitely more powerful than spoken words. The practical application requires daily discipline. Each morning, commit to not mentioning them unless directly asked. Each evening, review your day. Did you reference them unnecessarily? Did you use them as an excuse for current struggles? Did you credit them with power over your present? If yes, don't judge yourself. Simply notice and commit to tomorrow being different. Grace also means wishing them well genuinely, not performatively. You don't need to communicate this wish to them. It's an internal practice that frees you from the burden of hoping they suffer. When you genuinely hope they find happiness, just not with you, you achieve a level of spiritual freedom that transforms your entire energy. People feel this. They sense when you've truly released them, versus when you're still energetically holding on through resentment. 5. The magnetism of mysterious growth. The fifth attitude involves becoming mysteriously different, not obviously changed for their attention, but fundamentally transformed for your evolution. When those who knew you before encounter you now, they should feel like they're meeting a familiar stranger. Same soul, completely different energy. Epictetus taught that we must be like actors in a play, fully committed to our role, while remembering we're more than the role. When someone leaves your life, they freeze you in their mind at that moment, but you continue growing, evolving, becoming. When they encounter the new you, not performed but authentic, the cognitive dissonance is profound. This mysterious growth isn't about becoming someone else. It's about becoming more yourself. The parts of you that were dormant while trying to be valued by them now flourish in their absence. The dreams you put aside to accommodate them now direct your path. The person you were always meant to be emerges when you stop shrinking to fit someone else's limited vision. Consider the butterfly metaphor, but deeper. The caterpillar doesn't just grow wings, it completely dissolves into undifferentiated potential before reconstituting as something unrecognizable. When someone leaves you, you enter your cocoon phase, not hiding, but transforming at such a fundamental level that when you emerge, you're not an improved version of who they left. You're an entirely different category of being. Marcus Aurelius transformed from a philosophy student to an emperor, from a peaceful man to a military commander, from a healthy individual to someone managing chronic pain. Each transformation was mysterious to those who knew him before. His own teachers barely recognized the boy they taught in the emperor he became, not because he performed change, but because life demanded evolution and he answered. Don't announce your transformation. Don't document every step of your journey for them to see. Let your growth be like a tree in the forest, silent but undeniable. When they finally see who you've become, the shock of recognition mixed with unfamiliarity creates a desperate need to know this new version of you. The practical path to mysterious growth requires embracing what I call silent experiments. Try new things without telling anyone. Develop new skills without announcement. Change your routines, your habits, your patterns, all without explanation. Let people discover your changes through encounter, not through broadcast. This creates an air of mystery that's incredibly magnetic because it suggests depths unexplored, potentials unrevealed, aspects unknown. Also, embrace contradictions. If they knew you as serious, develop lightness. If they knew you as chaotic, develop structure. Not to confuse them, but because wholeness requires integrating opposites. The you they knew was partial, incomplete, limited by trying to be what you thought they wanted. The you that emerges should be so multifaceted that no one can claim to fully know you, least of all those who walked away from an earlier draft. 6. The strength of vulnerable authenticity. The sixth attitude might surprise you: vulnerable authenticity. Not weakness, but the strength to be genuinely yourself without apology or performance. When you stop trying to be what you think others want and become courageously authentic, you become irreplaceable. Seneca wrote letters admitting his fears, his failures, his struggles, not for sympathy, but from strength. When you can be vulnerable without needing rescue, authentic without needing approval, genuine without needing validation, you demonstrate a power that those who didn't value you couldn't see before. They left someone who was performing for their approval. Now they see someone who exists without performance. They dismissed someone who was bending to be chosen. Now they encounter someone standing in their truth. This shift from performance to presence is so dramatic that it forces them to question their entire evaluation of you. Vulnerable authenticity means admitting your flaws without using them as excuses. It means owning your mistakes without dwelling in shame. It means expressing your needs without becoming needy. It's the paradox of being completely open while being completely self-contained. You share your truth not because you need it validated, but because hiding it would be inauthentic. Marcus Aurelius demonstrated this in his Meditations, never intended for publication. He wrote about his struggles with anger, his disappointments with people, his physical ailments, his fears about death. But these admissions weren't weaknesses seeking comfort. They were honest assessments from someone strong enough to face reality without filters. This is the authenticity that makes you unforgettable, the vulnerability that makes you unshakable. When those who didn't value you encounter this authentic version, they experience profound confusion. They left someone they thought they knew, someone predictable, someone performing a role. Now they meet someone unpredictable because authentic, mysterious because genuine, powerful because vulnerable. The cognitive dissonance often triggers desperate attempts to understand who you've become, to reconcile who you were with who you are. But this authenticity must be genuine. Performed authenticity is just another mask. Real authenticity includes your shadows, your struggles, your imperfections, owned without shame but also without display. You're not trying to be perfect or imperfect, you're just being, and being is enough. The practice requires what I call truthful moments. Several times daily, when asked how you are, tell the truth. Not the whole truth, which might be inappropriate, but some truth. I'm navigating some challenges but finding my way. Today's been difficult, but I'm learning from it. I'm actually doing better than I have in months. These small truths build the muscle of authenticity until being genuine becomes more natural than performing. 7. The wisdom of emotional mastery. The seventh attitude is complete emotional mastery. Not suppression, but sovereignty over your emotional state. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." When those who didn't value you see that their absence didn't destroy you, that their rejection didn't define you, that their departure didn't diminish you, they realize they never had the power they thought they had. Emotional mastery doesn't mean not feeling. The Stoics weren't emotionless robots. They felt deeply but chose their responses deliberately. They distinguished between the initial emotional impression, which is automatic, and the secondary judgment, which is chosen. You might feel the pang of loss when remembering them. That's the impression. Whether you spiral into despair or acknowledge the feeling and move forward, that's your choice. This mastery means you can think of them without pain, speak of them without charge, encounter them without chaos. You've processed the grief, integrated the lessons, released the attachment. You're not emotionally numb, you're emotionally free. And freedom is intoxicating to those still imprisoned by their own choices. Epictetus, despite being a slave, achieved such emotional mastery that he could discuss his enslavement without bitterness. He could speak of his master's cruelty as simply facts, like weather patterns or market prices. This wasn't denial or suppression. He had fully processed these experiences, extracted their lessons, and released their emotional charge. When his former master encountered him years later, the complete absence of emotional reaction was more powerful than any anger could have been. When you master your emotional response to their absence, you demonstrate that your peace was never theirs to take, your joy was never theirs to grant, your worth was never theirs to determine. This realization often triggers desperate attempts to regain influence over your emotional state, to matter again in ways they chose not to matter before. The practice of emotional mastery begins with observation. Notice your emotional patterns around their memory. Do you feel anger at certain triggers, sadness at specific reminders, hope at particular possibilities? Don't judge these emotions, map them. Understanding your emotional landscape is the first step to navigating it consciously. Next, practice what the Stoics called the discipline of desire. When emotions arise about them, pause before indulging. Ask yourself, is this emotion serving me? Is it moving me toward my goals? Is it aligned with who I'm becoming? If not, acknowledge it and let it pass like weather through your internal sky. 8. The generosity of wishing them well. The eighth attitude is perhaps the most powerful, genuinely wishing them well from a distance. This isn't spiritual bypassing or fake forgiveness. It's the recognition that their path led away from you for reasons that ultimately serve your growth. When you can genuinely hope for their happiness without needing to be part of it, you achieve a level of spiritual maturity that's magnetic. Epictetus taught that we must wish all beings well, even those who harm us, not for their sake, but for our own freedom. When you genuinely wish well for those who didn't value you, you cut the energetic cords that bind you to resentment. You become free, and that freedom is visible, palpable, attractive. This doesn't mean wanting them back or being available if they return. It means releasing them so completely that their happiness doesn't threaten yours, their success doesn't diminish yours, their choices don't define yours. This level of generous detachment often triggers a desperate need to be included in your world again, precisely because you don't need them excluded from theirs. Marcus Aurelius practiced this with his son Commodus, who rejected everything Marcus tried to teach him. Rather than becoming bitter about his son's choices, Marcus continued to wish him well, to hope for his happiness, even while knowing Commodus would likely destroy much of what Marcus had built. This wasn't weakness or enabling. It was the recognition that holding resentment would only poison Marcus while changing nothing about Commodus. The practical application requires a daily practice I call distant blessing. Each morning, spend 30 seconds genuinely wishing them well. May they find what they're seeking. May they discover happiness. May they become who they're meant to be. Not may they realize what they lost, or may they suffer as I have. Genuine well-wishing without conditions, without connection, without expectation of return. This practice might feel impossible at first. Your ego will resist, your hurt will protest, your anger will rebel. Do it anyway. Start with just wishing them physical health if emotional happiness feels too generous. Build slowly toward genuine goodwill. The freedom you'll experience when you can truly wish them well is worth every moment of practice. 9. The ultimate power of living your purpose. The ninth and final attitude is the complete absorption in your life's purpose. When you're so focused on your mission, your contribution, your reason for being that you barely notice who's present or absent, you become a force of nature. Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, Epictetus, all faced rejection, dismissal, loss. But they were so committed to their purpose that these became minor footnotes in their larger story. When those who didn't value you see you living with purpose, contributing to something greater than personal relationships, building something that transcends individual validation, they realize they walked away from someone with destiny. Not everyone has the courage to live with purpose. When you do, you become unforgettable. Your purpose isn't about them or despite them. It exists independent of them. Whether they value you or not becomes irrelevant when you're valued by the contribution you're making, the lives you're touching, the legacy you're building. This purposeful living creates such a powerful, energetic signature that those who walked away often feel compelled to return, not to be with you, but to be near what you've become. Seneca's purpose was to teach wisdom through writing. Even in exile, even facing death, he wrote. His final letter, composed as Nero's soldiers waited to ensure his suicide, contained philosophical insights about the nature of death. He was so absorbed in his purpose that even dying became an opportunity to fulfill it. This level of purposeful living transcends personal drama entirely. Finding your purpose isn't about discovering some cosmic mission written in the stars. It's about identifying where your deepest joy meets the world's deepest need. What breaks your heart about the world? What unique combination of skills, experiences, and perspectives do you possess? Where these intersect, there's your purpose. Once identified, pursue this purpose with the dedication of Marcus Aurelius pursuing justice, even when the Senate opposed him. Pursue it with the persistence of Epictetus teaching philosophy, even when students disappointed him. Pursue it with the passion of Seneca writing wisdom, even when readers misunderstood him. This pursuit becomes your identity, your worth, your value, independent of anyone's recognition. The integration, becoming unforgettable. These 9 attitudes don't work in isolation. They weave together, creating a tapestry of transformation so profound that those who dismissed you won't recognize who you've become. But more importantly, you won't recognize who you were. The person who needed their validation, who chased their approval, who defined themselves through their recognition. That person dissolves like morning mist when these attitudes solidify. The integration happens gradually, then suddenly. You'll practice self-sufficiency while struggling with loneliness. You'll embody excellence while fighting the urge to show off. You'll practice indifference while secretly checking if they've noticed your transformation. This is normal. This is the process. Every moment of practice, however imperfect, builds toward a critical mass of change. One day, you'll realize you haven't thought about them in weeks. Not because you're suppressing memories, but because your life has become so full, so purposeful, so aligned, that there's simply no space for dwelling on those who chose to leave. This isn't forgetting, it's transcending. You remember them like you remember childhood, fondly but distantly, as part of a story that led to who you are but doesn't define who you're becoming. Conclusion. The paradox of transcendence. Here's the ultimate paradox the Stoics understood. When you embody these 9 attitudes, those who didn't value you often do come back, desperate to be part of your life again. But by the time they return, you've transcended the need for their validation. You've become someone who doesn't need them to choose you because you've chosen yourself so completely. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "What stands in the way becomes the way." Their rejection wasn't an obstacle to your becoming, it was the catalyst. Their inability to see your value wasn't your loss, it was your redirection toward those who could. Their departure wasn't an ending, it was your beginning. These 9 attitudes aren't tactics to win anyone back. They're principles for winning yourself back. They're not strategies for making others regret. They're practices for making yourself whole. When you embody them fully, you don't just make those who didn't value you regret their choice. You make yourself grateful they made it. Because here's what the Stoics knew that modern wisdom often misses. The person who didn't value you did you a favor. They created space for your growth. They removed themselves from a position they didn't deserve. They freed you to become who you were always meant to be. And who you were meant to be is magnificent, with or without their recognition. Let them chase, let them regret, let them desperately seek what they once dismissed. But you keep walking forward, embodying these attitudes not for their effect on others, but for their effect on you. Because when you become someone who doesn't need to be chosen, you become someone impossible to ignore. The Stoics faced rejection from emperors and slaves alike. They were dismissed, exiled, even executed. Yet their wisdom outlasted empires. Their attitudes transcended their circumstances. Their value was recognized by history, even when ignored by their contemporaries. You carry that same potential. These 9 attitudes aren't just philosophical concepts, they're your blueprint for transcendence. Start today. Choose one attitude, embody it fully. Watch how the energy shifts, how your presence changes, how your value becomes undeniable. Not because you're trying to be valued, but because you've transcended the need for external validation entirely. And that transcendence? That's what makes you unforgettable. Those who didn't value you will notice, they always do. But by then, their opinion will have become what it always should have been, irrelevant to your worth, unnecessary for your happiness, and insignificant compared to the value you've discovered in yourself. This is the way of the Stoics. This is your path to freedom. This is how you become not just valued, but invaluable. Not just chosen, but choosing. Not just worthy, but worthiness itself. The choice is yours. The power has always been yours. The worth was always yours. They just helped you discover it by walking away. Thank them silently. Wish them well genuinely, and then become so extraordinarily yourself that their absence becomes the greatest gift they ever gave you.